In a world accustomed to tradition, Pope Francis continues to defy expectations with his bold declarations.
You are asked to protect by means of the law the image and likeness fashioned by God on every human life.
His recent revelations regarding Jesus have left many grappling with their faith, as the pontiff dares to challenge conventional interpretations of Scripture. Join us as we explore the untold truth about Jesus revealed by Pope Francis. Get ready to be amazed as we embark on a journey of spiritual introspection, unlike any other. The unprecedented rise to papacy. On March 13, 2013, the Catholic Church witnessed a monumental change with the selection of Archbishop Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Argentina as Pope Francis. This historic event marked a new chapter as he became the first Jesuit pope and the first to hail from the Americas. His journey to the papacy was not just a simple ascension. It symbolized a departure from conventional norms. Born in Buenos Aires in 1936 to Italian immigrants, Pope Francis entered the Society of Jesus in 1958. He completed his studies of the humanities in Chile and returned to Argentina in 1963 to graduate with a degree in philosophy from the Colegio de San Jose in San Miguel. From 1964 to 1965, he taught literature and psychology at Immaculate Conception College in Santa Fe, and in 1966, he taught the same subject at the Colegio del Salvatore in Buenos Aires. From 1967 to 1970, he studied theology and obtained a degree from the Colegio of San Jose. After his 1969 ordination, Pope Francis continued his training between 1970 and 1971 at the University of Alcalá de Henares, Spain. Back in Argentina, he was novice master at Villa Barilari, San Miguel, professor at the Faculty of Theology of San Miguel, consultant to the province of the Society of Jesus, and also rector of the Collegio Maximo of the Faculty of Philosophy and Theology. In 1973, he was appointed provincial of the Jesuits in Argentina, an office he held for 6 years. He then resumed his work in the university sector, and from 1980 to 1986, he served once again as rector of the Colegio de San Jose, as well as parish priest, again in San Miguel. In 1986, he went to Germany to finish his doctoral thesis. His superiors then sent him to the Colegio del Salvador in Buenos Aires, and next to the Jesuit church in the city of Cordoba as spiritual director and confessor. In 1992, Pope John Paul II appointed him titular Bishop of Auca and Auxiliary of Buenos Aires, and in 1998, he was named Archbishop. 3 years later, in February 2001, when Pope John Paul II named him a cardinal, Pope Francis asked the faithful not to come to Rome to celebrate his appointment, but rather to donate to the poor what they would have spent on the journey. As Archbishop of Buenos Aires, a diocese with over 3 million inhabitants, he developed a missionary project focused on communion and evangelization. Until his election as Pope, he was a member of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments, the Congregation for the Clergy, the Congregation for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life, the Pontifical Council for the Family, and the Pontifical Commission for Latin America. From the beginning of his papacy, Pope Francis showcased a unique leadership style and a fresh perspective for the Church. He became renowned for his humility, simplicity, and unwavering dedication to social justice. Unlike his predecessors, he chose a path of modesty, opting to reside in the Vatican guest house instead of the Grand Apostolic Palace, and donning simple attire. These deliberate choices underscored his unwavering commitment to championing the cause of the less fortunate and the marginalized. Throughout his tenure, Pope Francis has championed vital themes such as compassion, inclusivity, and environmental care. He has advocated for a church that practices mercy and embraces everyone, irrespective of their background or situation. His inclusive approach has transcended boundaries as he actively seeks to foster connections with various faith communities and encourage dialogue among different religious groups. In his groundbreaking encyclical titled Laudato Si', Pope Francis delivered a powerful message on the urgent need for action regarding climate change and environmental preservation. With simplicity and clarity, he highlighted the interconnectedness of these issues with social justice and emphasized that the poor and vulnerable bear the brunt of ecological degradation. With that, Pope Francis emerged as a global leader on environmental matters and demonstrated his willingness to confront contemporary challenges head-on. Within the pages of Laudato Si', Pope Francis masterfully articulated the moral imperative for environmental stewardship. He called upon governments, organizations, and individuals to take responsibility for safeguarding our planet and its resources, stressing the dire consequences of inaction. By connecting environmental issues to matters of social justice, Pope Francis underscored the vital role of each individual in combating climate change and preserving our shared home. In his commitment to reform, Pope Francis has endeavored to address some of the most pressing challenges facing the Catholic Church. He has taken decisive steps to confront clergy sexual abuse, a painful issue that has haunted the institution for decades. Through increased transparency in Vatican finances, he has sought to restore trust and accountability, safeguarding the reputation of the Church. Additionally, by decentralizing authority within the Church, Pope Francis has voiced his desire to empower local communities and foster a more inclusive and participatory Church. Though met with resistance from various factions, Pope Francis's reform efforts have garnered support from many Catholics who welcome his commitment to modernizing and revitalizing the Church. His pursuit of justice, transparency, and inclusivity has resonated with individuals who are yearning for a more open and compassionate institution. While Pope Francis has been hailed as a reformer for his efforts to address pressing issues within the Catholic Church, his reformist impulses have also ventured into the realm of doctrine and theology, provoking both controversy and concerns among traditionalists. Through his unorthodox interpretations of Scripture, particularly regarding the Bible and Jesus, the pontiff has sparked debates and raised questions about the consistency of his teachings with established church doctrine. Critics argue that his statements risk undermining church teachings and causing confusion among the faithful. Pope Francis's willingness to challenge traditional interpretations and engage in theological discussions has not been without its detractors. However, it is important to note that his approach to Scripture and doctrine reflects a pastoral mindset and a desire to make the Church more accessible to the modern world. By presenting religious teachings in a language that is relatable and easily understood, the Pope aims to bridge the gap between faith and everyday life. Despite the criticisms, Pope Francis remains a beloved figure for many Catholics who appreciate his compassionate and pastoral approach. His commitment to social justice resonates deeply with individuals seeking a church that actively addresses societal inequalities and champions the cause of the marginalized. Beyond the Catholic community, the Pope's humility, empathy, and willingness to tackle global issues have earned him admiration from people of various faiths and even non-religious individuals. Controversies. Surrounding Pope Francis's views on biblical interpretation, Pope Francis's unique approach to biblical interpretation has ignited passionate debates and stirred controversies within the Catholic Church. Departing from traditional Catholic understanding, the pontiff has offered a fresh perspective that places greater emphasis on the human element of Scripture and the importance of contextual interpretation. One of the key points of contention arises from Pope Francis's assertion that the Bible should not be read as a chronicle of historical events or a factual account. In a 2016 interview with the Italian newspaper La Stampa, he compared the Bible to a newspaper, expressing that reading the Bible should not be approached in the same manner as reading a newspaper. Instead, the Pope encourages believers to approach the creation stories found in Genesis not as literal historical narratives, but as metaphorical and theological expressions, conveying profound spiritual truths about God and humanity. Likewise, in a 2017 homily, he talked about the story of Jesus multiplying the loaves and fishes and suggested that it may not have been a literal miracle, but rather a metaphor. This approach focuses on understanding Scripture in a way that resonates with contemporary believers, prioritizing meaning and relevance over rigid adherence to a literalist standpoint. Meanwhile, these interpretations have ignited fierce debates within the Catholic Church. Conservative Catholics and biblical literalists argue that Francis is undermining the authority of Scripture and challenging well-established teachings of the Church. They accused him of accommodating modern secular sensibilities at the expense of orthodox doctrine. They also contemplated that a literal reading of Scripture is essential to preserve the integrity and truth of the faith. Meanwhile, Cardinal Raymond Burke, a well-known conservative critic of Pope Francis, also expressed concerns about the Pope's approach to Scripture, fearing that it may mislead believers. He argued that the Church should prioritize the literal truth of the Bible, especially when it comes to matters of faith and morals. In addition to Cardinal Burke, other conservative commentators have gone further and accused Pope Francis of heresy and apostasy. They contend that he is betraying the core principles of Catholicism. These critics refer to the affirmation of biblical inherency by the Second Vatican Council and assert that the Pope's statements contradict this fundamental teaching. However, supporters of Pope Francis regard his approach to interpreting Scripture as aligned with the esteemed traditions of Catholic biblical scholarship. They emphasized that the Catholic Church has historically acknowledged the diverse literary genres present in the Bible, such as poetry, parables, and metaphors, indicating that a simplistic literal interpretation is not the sole method of understanding the text. Furthermore, advocates for Pope Francis argue that his focus on the spiritual and moral teachings of the Bible reflects a deep connection to Catholic heritage. By prioritizing the application of gospel values in everyday life over mere adherence to doctrinal statements, Pope Francis encourages Catholics to embrace a faith that is genuine and transformative. Through Pope Francis's emphasis on living out the core principles of the gospel, believers are urged to embody the teachings of love, compassion, and social justice in their actions and interactions. Fortunately, this approach resonates with many Catholics worldwide who appreciate the Pope's efforts to bridge tradition with contemporary challenges, thereby creating a faith that is not only orthodox but also authentic and relevant to the complexities of the modern world. Francis's perspective on the historical Jesus. Francis's perspective on the historical Jesus is captivating and aligns with his consistent focus on the well-being of the marginalized and impoverished. Rather than portraying Jesus as a distant and unreachable divine figure, the Pope presents him as a relatable human being who intimately understands the challenges and sufferings faced by ordinary people. This emphasis on the humanity of Jesus is reflected in the Pope's teachings and public statements. He frequently refers to Jesus's ministry, which was characterized by his compassion and care for the poor, the sick, and those on the fringes of society. Pope Francis highlights that Jesus's actions demonstrate the immense love and mercy of God towards humanity. In his 2018 apostolic exhortation, Gaudete et Exsultate, Pope Francis emphasizes that the life and death of Jesus exemplify the boundless love God has for us. Through his selfless sacrifice on the cross, Jesus revealed the depths of this divine love, showing humanity the path to true fulfillment and happiness. By highlighting Jesus' concern for the least fortunate, Pope Francis calls on all believers to imitate Christ's example and reach out to those in need with empathy and support. He emphasized that the message of the gospel is not merely an abstract belief, but a call to action, and also prompted Christians to engage in works of mercy, social justice, and compassion. For Pope Francis, Jesus' solidarity with the poor is not just a mere historical fact. It is a model for Christian living that holds immense relevance today. The Pope consistently challenges Catholics across the globe to follow Jesus' example by working towards social justice and reaching out to those who are marginalized. This focus on Jesus' humanity and his deep concern for the poor contrasts with traditional Catholic portrayals of Christ as an all-powerful divine king and ruler. While the Church has always acknowledged Jesus' divinity, it has often emphasized his magnificence, authority, and glory in art, literature, and liturgy. However, Pope Francis's approach highlights the ways in which Jesus identified with the lowly and suffering. He presents Jesus not as an unapproachable deity, but as a compassionate friend and companion who empathizes with humanity's struggles and walks alongside us. In his teachings, Pope Francis notes that Jesus' message calls us to act with compassion towards those in need, and to fight against oppression in all its forms. He emphasizes that the gospel is not merely a theoretical concept, but a lived reality that requires sustained action to bring about lasting transformation. Broader context of Catholic biblical scholarship. To appreciate the importance of Pope Francis's views on the Bible, it is crucial to consider them within the broader framework of Catholic biblical scholarship, especially in the aftermath of the Second Vatican Council between 1962 to 1965. The Second Vatican Council brought about a profound transformation in the Catholic Church's approach to Scripture. It ushered in a fresh perspective that embraced new interpretive methods and promoted a deeper involvement with contemporary biblical studies. This shift paved the way for a more dynamic and intellectually engaged approach to understanding the Bible. A notable development in Catholic biblical scholarship since Vatican II has been the growing prominence of historical critical methods. These methods aim to investigate the historical and cultural contexts in which the biblical texts were produced. Scholars employing historical critical analysis examine factors such as language, authorship, genre, and cultural background to shed light on the original intentions and meanings of the Scriptures. The adoption of historical critical methods has enriched Catholic biblical scholarship by unveiling the diverse contexts in which the biblical texts were written. This has led to a deeper understanding of the nuances and complexities present within the Scriptures, challenging simplistic interpretations and encouraging a more nuanced appreciation of their messages. These approaches seek to understand the Bible in its original historical and cultural context. All that is made possible with tools like textual criticism, form criticism, and redaction criticism to examine the composition and meaning of the text. While initially met with skepticism by the Church, fearing they might undermine the Bible's divine inspiration and authority, Vatican II encouraged Catholic scholars to engage with these methods in a discerning and faithful manner. The Council's document on divine revelation, known as Dei Verbum, affirms the significance of studying the Bible's human authors and the historical circumstances in which they wrote. Meanwhile, this acknowledgement does not diminish the ultimate primacy of God's authorship. Textual criticism enables scholars to meticulously analyze ancient manuscripts and versions of the Bible to establish the most accurate and reliable text. It involves comparing various sources to discern any discrepancies or errors that may have occurred over time through copyists or translation. Form criticism focuses on identifying and studying the specific literary forms and genres present in the Bible. By recognizing these distinctive forms, such as psalms, proverbs, parables, and historical narratives, scholars gain insights into how the authors intended to convey their messages. Redaction criticism examines the editorial processes and decisions made by the authors or editors of the biblical texts. By identifying differences, additions, or modifications within the text, scholars can explore the theological and historical intentions behind these editorial choices. Engaging with these critical methods does not undermine the authority or divine inspiration of the Bible. Instead, they provide a deeper understanding of the human aspect and cultural context in which the texts were written, thereby enriching our interpretation of God's message. In the years following Vatican II, Catholic biblical scholars have delved deep into the realm of historical critical approaches, which have significantly impacted their scholarship. These approaches aim to place the Bible within its olden, ancient context, exploring connections and influences from other ancient writings and religions prevalent in the Near East and Greco-Roman world. One fascinating aspect of this exploration entails an examination of the intricate processes through which the Bible came to be. Scholars have closely studied how oral traditions were passed down through generations and how they eventually took shape in text. They have also explored the redaction or editing processes that shaped the content of the Bible and the ways in which it was eventually canonized. However, the use of these historical critical methods has not been without its challenges and debates within the Church. Various perspectives have emerged, leading to occasional tensions between traditionalists and progressives. Traditionalists, often on the more conservative side, express concerns that these approaches may diminish the Bible's divine authority and inspiration. They fear that by extensively focusing on the Bible's historical and cultural context, it may lose its ultimate spiritual and universal significance. Some worry that an excessive emphasis on context could result in a subjective and relativistic interpretation of the Bible, potentially undermining the Church's established doctrinal teachings. Progressives view historical critical methods as powerful tools that deepen our understanding of the Bible and its profound message. By examining the text within its original cultural and historical context, we gain insights into the timeless spiritual and moral truths it conveys. These approaches acknowledge that the Bible, while divinely inspired, is also a product of its human authors and the particular cultural milieu in which it was written. Understanding these contextual factors helps us appreciate the Bible's rich layers of meaning and the universal values it espouses. On the other side, conservatives express concerns that an excessive focus on historical and cultural context might undermine the Bible's divine authority. They fear that emphasizing the cultural relativity of the text might lead to a subjective interpretation that disregards the objective truths it contains. This tension between conservatives and progressives occasionally spills over into controversies and debates within the Church, as scholars, theologians, and faithful believers grapple with interpreting the Bible in a meaningful and authentic way. One significant episode in this ongoing conversation was the reception of the 2002 document, The Interpretation of the Bible in the Church, by the Pontifical Biblical Commission. This document sought to strike a balance between the progressive and conservative perspectives. While affirming the value of historical critical methods, it called for an approach to Scripture that integrated both the scholarly insights gained from these methods and the spiritual interpretation grounded in the living tradition of the Church and the sensus fidelium, or the sense of the faithful. Now it's time for our subscribers' pick. Now that we know that Pope Francis reveals the shocking truth about Jesus, have you ever wondered where his claims originated from? It's without doubt that Pope Francis's transformative approach to faith has made him a beloved figure among Catholics and people of various religious backgrounds alike. Since taking up his role as Pope in 2013, Pope Francis has made lots of bold statements regarding the Church. But his latest revelations about Jesus is something that has brought lots of controversies and criticism. This brings up the question, what is it exactly we don't know about Jesus? Perhaps is there something the Scripture did not reveal about Jesus to us? Do let us know about your thoughts in the comments section below as we continue with this video. Comparisons to other Christian leaders. Pope Francis's approach to the Bible and his emphasis on Jesus's humanity have sparked intriguing comparisons with other Christian leaders. These comparisons extend beyond the boundaries of the Catholic Church, resonating with broader trends in contemporary theology and biblical interpretation. One point of comparison lies with mainline Protestant perspectives, especially those influenced by liberal and progressive theology. For many Protestant scholars and leaders, the emphasis on the human dimension of Scripture has been a long-standing focus. They argue that understanding the Bible requires recognizing it as a collection of texts shaped by the historical and cultural contexts of its authors. They say it is really important to understand the Bible by thinking about what is happening now. That means looking at things like fairness, treating everyone the same, and taking care of the environment. Pope Francis believes this too. He thinks the Bible is alive and has a lot to say about what's going on today. And it's not just Catholics who feel this way. Many mainline Protestants also think the Bible is relevant today. They see it as a book that can help us deal with the problems we face now. When Pope Francis talks about helping poor people and those who are treated unfairly, he's following a tradition in Protestantism called the social gospel. This tradition is all about using Christian ideas to make things fairer for everyone. So when Pope Francis talks about these things, he is not just speaking to Catholics. He is speaking to anyone who cares about fairness and equality. Meanwhile, Francis's beliefs have sparked quite a bit of controversy among some evangelical Protestants. These particular Protestants have a more rigid and absolute view of Scripture, believing that it is divinely inspired and completely infallible. They insist that it should always be taken literally and flawlessly guide our faith and actions. What worries them is that Francis's focus on the human aspect of Scripture could weaken its authority. They fear that by highlighting human involvement in the writing and interpretation of the Bible, it might lead to a dangerous shift towards relativism and subjectivity. In other words, they were concerned that people might start interpreting the Bible in a way that suits their own personal preferences and beliefs, rather than adhering to an objective understanding. However, it's important to note that even within evangelicalism, there is a movement gaining momentum that embraces more progressive and moderate perspectives. These voices are open to exploring historical critical methods of studying Scripture and interpreting it in the context of its time and culture. Leaders like Jim Wallis and Tony Campolo exemplify this progressive and moderate approach. They strive to blend their evangelical faith with a strong commitment to social justice. They also advocate for a more nuanced approach to understanding the Bible, recognizing that its teachings should be examined in light of present-day circumstances. In addition to the comparisons with Protestant leaders, Francis's view of the Bible aligns with wider developments in modern theology and biblical studies. Over the past few decades, there has been a notable shift towards recognizing the significance of contextual and liberationist approaches to Scripture. These approaches aim to understand the Bible from the standpoint of those who are poor, oppressed, and marginalized. Renowned scholars like Gustavo Gutierrez and Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza have contended that the Bible should not be seen as a timeless and abstract text. Rather, they argue that it is a vibrant and dynamic message that directly addresses the everyday struggles and aspirations of God's people. Impact on the faithful and the future of Catholicism. Pope Francis has stirred up a variety of reactions from everyday Catholics with his contentious comments about the Bible and his focus on the humanity of Jesus. These responses showcase the wide spectrum of beliefs and practices that exist within the Catholic Church. While some have embraced his perspective as a welcome change, others have raised eyebrows or even sounded the alarm, viewing it as a straying from traditional Catholic doctrine. In contrast, many progressive and moderate Catholics have found solace and inspiration in Francis's viewpoints. They admire his endeavors to foster a more inclusive, empathetic, and socially attuned church. They perceive his interpretation of Scripture as part of a grander scheme aimed at rejuvenation and reform within the Church. Some have gone so far as to laud him as a groundbreaking pope who is pushing the boundaries of the Church, urging it to embrace its prophetic calling and commitment to justice and solidarity. However, Pope Francis's bold statements on the Bible have not only sparked admiration, but have also triggered criticism from more conservative Catholics within the Church. Concerns have been raised about the perceived risk of him weakening the Church's core doctrines and traditional teachings. Some critics argue that his emphasis on the human aspects of Scripture, while de-emphasizing its divine inspiration, may lead to confusion and division among believers. They worry that this approach could provide ammunition to detractors looking to undermine the Church's moral authority. The heart of the debate lies in the belief that by highlighting the human side of Scripture, Francis may be paving the way for a more subjective and relative interpretation of faith. Critics fear that such an approach could potentially erode the unity and identity that the Church has long upheld. In spite of these disagreements, there is a noticeable impact of Francis's perspective on the Bible within the Catholic community, especially among younger Catholics. Many young individuals have found inspiration in his message of compassion, inclusivity, and commitment to social justice. They see the Pope as a beacon of a more genuine and involved form of faith, one that resonates with their values and aspirations for a better world. They are looking for approaches that resonate with their own experiences and address their concerns rather than being confined by traditional doctrinal frameworks. This growing movement reflects a desire for a faith that is more applicable to the complexities of the modern world. As these Catholics delve into a more contextually grounded and historically informed reading of the Bible, it opens up the possibility for significant shifts in Catholic theology and practice. By embracing a lens that considers the social and ethical dimensions of faith, they hope to explore a more inclusive and compassionate approach to the teachings of Scripture. This evolving perspective may also usher in a more dialogical and open-ended approach to doctrinal questions, encouraging a deeper engagement with the complexities of faith. Rather than clinging to set answers, the emphasis is placed on the ongoing exploration and discernment of what it means to live out one's faith in today's world. Moreover, this reimagining of the role of Scripture may reignite the Church's prophetic mission. Inspired by the teachings of Scripture, Catholics are being called to confront urgent challenges such as poverty, injustice, and environmental degradation. They see the Bible not just as a static source of wisdom, but as a living and relevant guide that compels them to act in response to these pressing issues. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.